Everything started out dark before Rage spoke. The flagship of the frontier. An armor-plated rose in dragon form. He began as a green flying wyvern similar to Rathian was shown, but with countless giant red spikes all over its body. It was then hit with an explosive blast, turning to face a group of hunters running at it. Dripping with noxious poison. And with the unparalleled power of sleep. Rage declared as the creature roared at the hunters, before it was suddenly shown sleeping with a lullaby playing in the background. The teens were already on the edge of their seats at this. I don't know what this thins is yet, but it already sounds awesome. Nora said. I know, right? An armored rose? I have got to get one of them. Ruby explained eagerly. Then they saw the beast and, while they weren't disappointed, they didn't find it greatly wowing, either. It kind of looks like a Rathian. Just way spikier. Coco pointed out. And it's poisonous? It really does just sound like another Rathian or rat halos. Emerald agreed. Still, a poisonous dragon is never boring. I mean, look at those spikes. Those would mess anyone's day up. Neo said. But, as Rage spoke of unparalleled power, they started getting excited once again, only for it to get immediately ruined when they saw the monster sleeping. Oh, come on. All the teens shouted at once. I am getting real sick of Rage trolling us like that. Seriously, trolls always think they're funny, but they're really not. Ilya growled, turning red and yellow in anger. Ah, lighten up, Ilya. I think it looks kind of cute when it's sleeping. Ruby cooed a little, along with her mother and Velvet. Right? It looks so calm and peaceful right now. How many monsters can you really say look that cute in their sleep? Velvet asked. And with that lullaby music in the background, I'd almost believe I was looking at a cute little kitten and not a dragon absolutely covered in spikes. Summer said sweetly. Suddenly, everything went black again. Seriously, this monster will literally try and kill you in its sleep. And that's actually really cool. Rage admitted with an echo to his voice. However, upon hearing this knowledge, the sound of a record scratching could be heard as the adults did a double take at this news. Did he just say what I think he said? Glinda asked, clearing out her ears just to be certain. That this monster will try to kill you in its sleep? Yes. I heard that quite clear. And I'm absolutely baffled and terrified as to how that's possible. Ironwood said, clearly shaken by this news. Then, some of the teens and less mature adults began snickering. Maybe it sleepwalks. And has the occasional hunter as a midnight snack. There is such a thing as sleep eating, Jimmy. Crow said with a smirk, earning a laugh from those who had been snickering. Actually, if that is what really happens, should we even try to fight it if we see it sleeping? I mean, everyone has heard that rule, right? That you should never wake up a sleepwalker, because they could freak out and attack you, or just fall down and hurt themselves. John pointed out. Many paused and stopped to think at this. Huh. Good point, Vomit Boy. Rage did say it's dripping with poison, so I'm guessing any contact would probably leave you poisoned, so if it freaked out and fell down, someone could get seriously hurt. Yang said. Weiss was shocked at this. Did Yang just point out something logical? She asked in shock. My sensors indicated that to be a near impossibility. I am as shocked as you are. Penny said in surprise. A group of hunters were then hunting this creature, the Huntress of Focus, using a bow. Welcome then, everybody, as we talk Espinas, quite literally the rat halos of the frontier and, honestly, a fascinating monster. Honestly, unbelievably unique, at least in how it fights. So, the Lord of the Great Forest, Espinas. It is said in ancient times, he battled with an elder dragon, a lowly flying wyvern eventually came out on top and won. Rage explained as several creatures of the forest were shown happily going about their day. The elder dragon in question was Kushala Daora, the dragon of wind, the steel dragon, and, let's be honest, he does not go down easy. So, you may be wondering how Espinas managed to best him. Well, what is Kushala Daora's signature weakness? Poison. So, that might give you a hint to what Espinas is all about, but it goes so much deeper than that, though the poison does go very deep. Rage declared in an ominous tone as a Kushala Daora was shown flying around a snowy mountain during a blizzard. Espinas? Sounds more like a cooking spice than a giant dragon, Cinder said with a smirk. I could certainly imagine finding something of a similar name in the culinary section of a department store. But never forget, Miss Fall, or any of you students, you should never judge something by name or appearance. You never know how it may just surprise you. And one of the many things we've learned from these videos is that these creatures are full of surprises. We would have to be quite foolish to make assumptions based on their names or appearance at this point. Ashbin told the students. Roman whistled after this bit of information. Lord of the Great Forest, huh? That's quite the title, he admitted. And a well-earned title at that, if he really defeated an elder dragon in order to get it. Hazel added. For it to take down a living natural disaster, could its poison really be that devastating? Winter asked, looking to Ozymandias. The metal monster lowered its head in shame at this. Indeed, it is. Even our mighty metal hide stands no chance against the countless spikes that line their form. And, as this human has stated, our kind has no defense against such an excruciatingly potent toxin as theirs. This legend of the defeat of one of ours to a mere flying wyvern is the greatest shame of the Kushala Daora species, the elder dragon said. Espinas was then shown walking through the forest in the evening. Espinas is armored. He is heavily armored. He is heavily armored. He is heavily, ultimately, mega ridiculously, absolutely armored. And that is where his whole shtick begins. He is so incredibly, ridiculously, completely, utterly, unbelievably armored that he spends most of his time asleep, because he literally doesn't feel threatened by essentially everything to the point where he will stay sleeping while being actively killed by other things, because those things actively killing him, before getting through his armored plating, will get too exhausted and or bored and give up. That's so awesome. He starts every encounter fast bloody asleep, because he doesn't give a fuck. Just leave Espinas alone. Alright? He doesn't care. He really doesn't care. Rage laughed as Espinas then flew into its cave from an opening in the top. Many of them were quick to lose their patience with just how much emphasis Rage put on the level of armor Espinas had. Enough. There's putting emphasis on something, then there's beating us over the head with it. Is he actively trying to annoy people so much they stop watching? Adam demanded. I have to agree. Even if it is true, there is only so much information we can get from him saying it's really armored. Ren agreed. However, the two of them quickly found their feet in their mouths as Rage explained how it could sleep through something trying to kill it. Many of them found themselves unable to speak as they struggled to process this information. Why you have to be joking? No creature can really feel that level of safety to be able to sleep all day and think nothing can threaten it. That completely goes against any animal's natural threat response. Weiss cried out. I wish I could feel that comfortable just napping anywhere. Blake said, imagining herself napping peacefully while basking in the sunlight out in the ancient forest, with Gamble Shroud magically flying around her to kill any Grimm that approached her. Well, to be fair, Weiss, there are creatures in very select areas that have no natural predators and have therefore lost their fear of, basically everything. So, if this creature's armor and poisonous defenses are really that strong, it would make sense that it feels like nothing will threaten it, because nothing can. Pyrrha told the heiress. The hunters were now attacking a sleeping Espinas as it lazily swiped its tail in its sleep to knock them away. You will bounce off nearly his entire body, except for his tail and/or head, and you just have to really, well, be worthy of his attention. You have to get him up. In his sleep, he will just go away, just meekly move around just to get rid of you. And that's quite effective, because just touching an Espinas can be a death sentence. You see those bristling red thorns? Well, he very much is rose-like, beautiful from afar, but deadly to the touch. Each one of them is packed with incredibly potent toxins. And thus, every attack from this creature is going to fill you with them. Rage explained as the hunter was hit by the beast's tail and was visibly weakened from poisoning already. Many of them were in disbelief at how devastating the poison truly was. If the poison is truly that potent and fast-acting, that must put it in line with some of the deadliest venoms in our world, like the cone snail or stone fish, which can kill in as little as half an hour. Penny said in concern. Okay, so never touch this thing, got it? In fact, never get within 10 feet of it. John said fearfully. However, the seriousness of this moment was soon ruined by laughter from the Rose/Branwyn family as well as Nora, Emerald, Neo, and Coco. Ha 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 ha. It's not even fighting and it's beating the hunters. Ruby laughed. That was the laziest tail swipe I've ever seen and it still sent him flying. Neo giggled. I know we should feel bad for them, but it's just too funny. Summer said through fits of laughter. You do realize that Hunter was hit with a highly lethal poison, right? Winter questioned. I'm sure he's fine. They probably have antidotes. Besides, I doubt they would have let out the video if the hunter didn't survive. Nora said. I would love to just be able to sleep through a fight by throwing a lazy punch and taking out whoever attacked me. Young laughed. An Iodrome suddenly leapt in to try and attack the sleeping Espinas as well. And that means that even in his sleep, anything that approaches is more likely to damage itself than it is the Espinas. Indeed, one of the ways that it hunts is literally staying still and letting smaller creatures come over and either through aggression or curiosity, kill themselves against his spikes. He wakes up when he gets hungry and just enjoys his pre-sleep killed toxic meat. Like, come on. He explained as the Iodrome now appeared to be suffering the effects of poisoning. Suddenly, a transparent image of an astonished-looking Vegeta was played over the hunting footage. Oh, that's so cool. The Scion Prince said in amazement at what he was observing. Well, I have to tip my hat to that. Just being able to laze around and enjoy itself while getting a free meal and not even working for it? That's the life I've always dreamed of. Roman admitted, nodding in approval along with Neo. I think that's the life everyone dreams of. Ilias said. Yeah. You know you're doing something right if even Vegeta says you're cool. Coco agreed. It's a daunting challenge, but that makes it all the more interesting to try and find a way around it in order to bring down a nearly invincible beast. Hazel said. Just as long as it doesn't swat you away like a cow swatting a fly with its tail. Seriously, you can't tell me that's not the exact same energy this thing's giving off. Crow laughed. A hunter with a longsword continued to attack Espina's tail, finally waking it up with an exclaiming sound effect. Eventually, though, you will get him to wake up. You will prove worthy of him to at least see what's going on. But you might think, so, the fight starts, then? No, the fight doesn't really start then. He's just woken up, he's still sleepy, he's still very much arrogant in his defenses. He'll very slowly, very casually walk around and the thorn wyvern will do what it do and try to evaluate you. It will very slowly, gently try to push you away, and you have to keep pressing the attack and try to break that absolutely ironclad hide. He is an example of a near-perfect offense and defensive adaptation working simultaneously in harmony. He can't be hurt because of just how dense, rigid, and interlaced his suit of armor is, but also, he doesn't need to bother repelling or fighting because his oozing toxic spikes will do that for him. You really have to get on his bad side to actually kill him. Rage, informed as the Espinas did indeed only lazily stagger about rather than fight its threat. Considering how dangerous he is while he's just sleeping, I'm not sure I want to get on his bad side. Emerald said worriedly. It has to have some kind of weakness. Some flaw in its strategy. Some crack in its armor. Some opening in its defenses. Or a way to get around its poison. Remember, it's not about overpowering your opponent. It's about taking away the power they have. Cinder said coolly. Meanwhile, her mind was racing with how exactly she could possibly do that without getting some of those spikes in her ass. I'm just wondering what exactly happens when you get on his bad side that makes it easier to kill him. Ren wondered. Finally, it seemed as though Espinas was getting serious, charging back and forth and spitting fireballs. And thus, one of his greatest strengths also proves to be his downfall and greatest weakness. Eventually, if you keep going, if you keep being just a real, irritating little bastard of a hunter, stabbing and nicking and just not giving up, he will enrage. His scales will flush red, the anger boiling in his veins, and his shell will soften as a result. And that softening now makes him very much more vulnerable. He now becomes much deadlier, poison bubbling, spouting from his spines, from his horn. He gets a lot faster, he will charge almost like a monoblows, horn down. He will unleash elemental fury, a fireball that's not just a fireball, but infused with his concoction of chemicals, leaving you not just burned on impact, not just burned and poisoned on impact, but burnt, poisoned, and paralyzed on impact. It is not something that you want to have an encounter with. Rage warned as Espinas was glowing red, flying around and shooting purple fireballs at the hunters. That's a scary thought, being the reason your own absolute defense fails on you. Velvet said with a shudder. It just goes to show that you can have a strategy that is completely unbeatable, but as soon as you deviate from it or make one step in the wrong direction, it can all come crashing down. We need to be able to keep ourselves in check. Ren said, thinking to his own future and how he almost got himself killed against the RWBY. However, they were shocked and baffled when they heard the beast could mix its poison with its fireballs. Fire, poison, and paralysis. How can it possibly mix all those elements in one? Where does the paralysis part even come from? Kira asked, racking her brain to try and understand how such a thing was possible, as well as drawing on all her previous experiences as Monstrous champion to think of how she would survive a fight against this creature. I've suffered through many painful experiences in that past at Salem's hands. But this fills me with a sense of dread she never has. Ashbin said, more than a little unnerved. You would be left trapped in place, suffering from the poison ravaging your insides, while the fire burns away at your outsides. I'm having a hard time thinking of anything that could be a more agonizing experience. Glinda added. So cool. Ruby cried out, along with the more excitable thrill-seekers, Yang, Coco, and Nora, while the more stoic thrill-seekers simply nodded. What? The more reasonable members of the cast questioned, concerned about the sanity of their peers. That just makes things more exciting. The risk from such an attack just adds to the adrenaline of fighting such a wyvern. Hazel told them. It almost sounds like something straight out of Pincherman. Yang added. And I just think it's cool. Poison fireballs. I mean, just look at them. Ruby said, pointing to the screen. I have to admit, there is a kind of beauty in those purple fireballs, if you can ignore how terrifying getting hit by one of them would be. Blake admitted. The hunters were now outside while fighting Espinas, the bow wielder firing at the rose-like dragon. And thus, the fight continues and eventually, you will bring him down. It's a simple creature, it is really cool and clearly very effective. A monster that is so heavily armored that it literally doesn't bother to fight back unless you really are persistent. A monster that, if it doesn't see you as a threat after waking up, will actually go back to sleep in the ultimate insult to whatever is pathetically trying to injure it. I mean, that's just so cool. There's no other way about it. There really isn't. So, while he might be green and poisonous like a Rathian, he is so much more. Rage declared, showing the image of a Rathian as the hunters continued to fight the flying tank. Weiss scoffed at this. How arrogant can this thing possibly be to go back to sleep knowing something is attacking it? Weiss questioned. Agreed. It's fitting that this is a poisonous monster, because it has a toxic personality, insulting its enemies like that. Cinder agreed. The two most pompous and arrogant girls here calling an animal arrogant? Oh hey Kettle, here's Pot. Have you two met? Yang teased with a shit-eating grin, everyone laughing at the two's exposed hypocrisy, the two of them muttering under their breath about Yang watching her back. However, I'm not so sure that can be called arrogance, since its confidence is clearly founded from a place of certainty. Ironwood admitted. I'm with Rage, though. A monster that sleeps through anything because it has so much faith in its poison and armor is just so cool. RWBY said, completely enamored with the monster. Exactly. That's the definition of living its best life. Roman agreed. The fight then went on, the huntress narrowly dodging the beast's attacks after firing an arrow. While the fight, once he's angry, might seem and kind of is a very simple, straightforward flying wyvern fight, getting him there is so much more of an experience. And you see now, then, why he managed to defeat Kushala. He is a counter to him. Not only do the gale force winds essentially just break against his carapace, as soon as Kushala touches him, he will be impaled even through his iron skin and injected with that poison. And it is very potent poison. It's not just your regular poison. It lasts for a long time and is incredibly agonizing, sapping life rapidly. So, yeah, Kushala wants none of that. He essentially has no way of stopping it, and that's why Espinas doesn't care. Because even elder dragons just can't be bothered to put in the sheer amount of effort it would require to kill one of these things. Rage said in awe of the creature as the hunters evaded its attacks. Everyone shuddered at the description of the poison. Yeah, I think Kushala's on the right page, then. Staying away from that poison sounds like a really good idea. Ilias said. I'm surprised hunters are willing to fight in melee range against a monster like that. I only need one look at that thing to tell me you keep your distance and use ranged weapons. Neo stated. The hunters finally managed to bring down the Espinas, before a new, brown Espinas was shown. So, there is a few more version, then. There is the Espinas subspecies, which is just named that, kind of anticlimactically, the brown thorn wyvern, and this guy just turns him up to 11. Can be found in more desert Y areas, but also high atop the forest. He is just more intense. He is easier to wake up, he is easier to anger, and his chief change is in that ball of death that he can send firing at you, and it really becomes a ball of death, a huge explosion of poison, paralysis, and flaming doom. It's very, very potent. Rage warned as the creature was shown spitting out an absolutely massive poison fireball that resulted in an enormous explosion. Many of them were shocked by the explosion generated from the subspecies fireball, with the adults having their jaws hit the floor. That explosion was absolutely massive. From such a small and fast fireball. Winter said in horror. Not to mention, it was clearly caught up in that explosion, but was completely unfazed. Glinda added, "So it can resist poison and paralysis as powerful as its own." Ironwood pointed out, "It truly is formidable. That means it would be a worthy opponent." Hazel said, "I think all those years working for Salem have driven you insane." Summer told the massive man, "Hey, come on, short stack. Half of us can move at the freaking speed of sound. Something like that should be no issue to dodge." Crow told them. The beast then landed and charged at the hunter facing it. Apart from that, it is just Espinas turned up to 11, but if you want Espinas turned up to 12, there is the Espinas rare species. Now, rare species, remember, are Elder Dragon level, akin to Gold and Silver Rathian and Rat Halos. Rage reminded everyone, before another hunter was shown approaching a gorgeous white Espinas with pink spikes. And this guy is even easier to wake up, even easier to get to that proper fight, you could call it. And, he also looks, I'll be honest, really beautiful, the white now scaling, with the pink tipped thorns. He really is quite incredible to behold. Rage admitted as the hunter started attacking the sleeping wyvern. The group was then in awe when they saw the rare species. "It's beautiful," Velvet said. "Yeah. The white plating is just stunning and goes perfect with the pink spikes. They contrast each other so well." Coco agreed. "I need this thing's armor. White and pink. It's like it was made for me," Neo added. "And in the moonlight like that, it's almost like it's giving off its own light with how it reflects off the shell." Pyrrha noted. "So pretty," Ruby said, her eyes sparkling at the sight before her. The hunter's attacks were quick to wake up the white Espinas, who quickly took to the skies. And he starts to go full frontier and is just ridiculous. I mean hellfire. It scorches the entire arena, makes miasma seep everywhere, like these tornadoes of death. You have to wait for a gap in and then run in and attack him. His poison is said to kill anything in under 10 minutes, which is quite intense when you think about it like that. But, he really is just ridiculously crazy Espinas, and, honestly, I still really like him, just because of how he looks. And I'll admit, the patches of so-called hellfire, the poison fire that he puts everywhere do look really cool. Rage admitted as, indeed, the creature created giant tornadoes of purple and red fire spiraling around it. And, just like that, the awe and wonder was gone when they saw the poisonous fire tornadoes. "Oh, come on. That's just a bit excessive, isn't it?" Ilya said in horror. "Actually, Ilya, this is one of the more believable things I've seen from monsters in a while. There are actually very rare phenomena known as a fire whirl, which is, in essence, a fire tornado. So, with it being able to add poison to its fire, this is decently believable. Sadly, that doesn't make it any less frightening." Penny explained. "I find it more disturbing how they almost perfectly circle Espinas with only one opening to reach the monster." Winter said. "I believe Neo said it best, but I'm against approaching this monster in general. I'm on board with only fighting it with ranged weaponry. No one should get anywhere near that fire or those spikes." Glinda spoke in concern. A hunter with a long sword was shown fighting an enraged Espinas. And, many people of the frontier were also massive fans of the monster. Many of their decor looked to resemble the monster or have its imagery. Hell, his hammer is literally his head. Not just kind of his head, not just shaped a little bit, not just using his horn. It's his head. Rage pointed out as, with a gory sound effect, an image was shown of a huntress wielding an Espina's hammer that, as the host had said, was the monster's severed head on a stick. So, you know, Cotton would absolutely love that. Rage admitted while throwing shade at his hunting partner. The cast was in awe of all the Espinas memorabilia, and especially the weapons, RWBY leaning in more and more for each one. At least until they got to the hammer. Oh, my gods! Velvet, Pyrrha, and Penny all cried out, all of them, along with Nora just as disturbed by the weapon as RWBY. Speaking of the Red Reaper. Ah! Head cut off! RWBY shrieked, before swaying back and forth dizzily and fainting into Cinder's arms. RWBY! Her girlfriend, mother, and sister all cried out. I think I'm gonna be sick. Velvet groaned, holding a puke bucket, while barely resisting the urge to faint herself. And beside her, Weiss and Neo held puke buckets as well, barely resisting the urge to empty their stomachs into it. Why would someone do something so horrific? Who would wield something that disturbing? Pyrrha questioned. I wish to delete this from my memory banks. Penny groaned. That's messed up. Crow said, deeply disturbed. Save your opinions until the end, please. Katana requested. But then, new images were shown of the armor made from the flying wyvern. His armor also looks really awesome, though I wish it would use more of his scales, since, you know, they're so ridiculously hard to get through, you'd think you would be ridiculous in defense. His weapons, by the way, poison and fire. Dual-element weapons are pretty epic. Rage admitted as he admired the armor and weapons once more. Everyone was quick to breathe a sigh of relief that the mood had lightened up. And many of them were big fans of the armor. Okay, that looks awesome, I'm not gonna lie. Yang admitted. Yeah. Heck, I might even wear that as casual, everyday clothes. Coco agreed. Yeah. I'm liking the black jackets. And I think it actually has just the right amount of armor plating. Sure, a little more couldn't hurt, but it would have killed the look. Crow added. Well, what did you think? Katana asked. I gotta admit, it's pretty cool. Just sitting there and sleeping, letting its armor and spikes do all the work. Simple, but effective. John admitted. Yeah. And it kind of works like a normal animal in our world. Most animals that stand out like Espinas are usually poisonous, so Espinas with all those spikes is basically saying I'm poisonous and spiky. Touch me, and you'll become a pincushion filled with poison. Emerald added. It's got the looks, the title, and the lifestyle to put it in my top 5. Seriously, this thing might just be my spirit animal. Roman said. Yeah, I'm with Torchwick on this one. Not to mention, it's absolutely adorable when it's sleeping. Summer agreed. And I think it's epic how it can basically beat an elder dragon by just sitting there. Coco stated. I love everything about it. Its poison fireballs are really cool, especially the subspecies making those huge explosions, and it's so cool how it can fight by sleeping. And anything with impenetrable armor is the most epic thing ever. Plus, it looks like a rose stem, all green with sharp thorns. RWBY said. However, all of a sudden, she became saddened over something. Her mother was quick to catch on to this, however. RWBY? What's wrong, sweetie? She asked in concern. Well, I wanted to sleep and cuddle next to a sleeping Espinas, but how can I without getting poisoned by any of its thorns? RWBY questioned. It's Sergio's all over again. Pyrrha groaned. I wouldn't do it, but it sounds fun. Nora said. I cannot be poisoned, so I believe I would enjoy that as well. Penny said. Summer was dumbfounded at this. I was concerned about my daughter's well-being. But now, I'm concerned about my daughter's sanity. The Rose matriarch thought. And this sentiment was shared by pretty much everyone other, minus Penny and Nora, with even Ashvin, the reincarnating wizard with an immortal ex-wife, looked at the girl like she had grown a second herd. Perhaps we should have psychological evaluations performed biannually on our students. Ashbin whispered to Glinda, who nodded and wrote that note down. Sometimes I think she's just as crazy as Nora. Blake whispered to Weiss. Exactly. Never mind getting poisoned. She'd be lucky if she wasn't crushed to death when Espinas moves or turns in its sleep. Weiss agreed. So, Katana, are we going to get Espinas on Remnant? Nora asked hopefully. It's on the list, yes. You'll probably find them mostly in Mistral or Vale, maybe even in the forests near Patch. Katana said. What? Absolutely not. They're far too toxic to have running around on Remnant. And their hide would make them nearly impossible to put down if they become a threat. They cannot be allowed in our world. Ironwood demanded. James, it literally spends most of its time sleeping. Usually in a cave. You'd have to go insanely far out of your way to run into one, so it's not like they'll be super hostile. Honestly, it's probably one of the safest monsters you guys would get. And they've been found in places other than the frontier, but the world hasn't ended yet. So clearly, they aren't as dangerous as you think. Katana assured him. Plus, it's not like you can stop me from adding Espinas, or any monster for that matter to your world. She added with a shit-eating grin. Crow chuckled at this. She's gotcha there, Jimmy. He said cheekily with a smirk. James wanted to argue, but realized that they were right, so he just gave Katana a death glare and groaned to himself. Yes. We're getting Espinas in Remnant. I can't wait to get one for my legion of pets. I'm gonna call it Thorn. And I will figure out how to cuddle with it without getting poisoned. RWBY mentally declared. So, what were your opinions on the Espinas hammer? Katana asked. It's sick. Not as in awesome as in disgusting. Velvet shouted. I agree. How could someone desecrate a poor animal like that? Winter demanded. And then further desecrate its decapitated head by shoving a stick in it. Emerald agreed. I'm just questioning how that would work. What stops the stick from coming out? Crow questioned. Come to think of it. How did they get the stick in without being poisoned? Cinder wondered. I'm highly questioning the practicality of a head on a stick. Ironwood said. I'd use it. I mean, it's creepy, but still cool. Nora said, everyone eyeing her with both disgust and a seriously expression. You've got issues, Valkyrie. Ilya told her. I have to agree with James. I can't imagine anyone wielding a head on a stick effectively. It has to be some kind of joke weapon, there's no way it could really be effective. Whoever thought of that must be out of their mind. Glinda said. Oh, trust me, if you thought a head on a stick was a crazy weapon idea, why don't you see some of Cotton's craziest weapons? Teko said, preparing a montage of Cotton's craziest weapons.